We would be honored if you would join us.
All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of Dungeon Crawlers, where we have murdered every trash panda out there. That's right.
No.
We found a giant trap that trapped every one of them. We used a Snickers bar, and somehow Scott rigged up the world's biggest firework display ever. And unfortunately, well, they went to a different dimension. That dimension collapsed. It blew up. And now you're in the current reality that you now live in. That's right.
Welcome.
Scott is to blame for COVID.
That is
every trash panda.
And that is the power of rolling too many ones in the same night.
Yes, 12 ones in a row. Just you ultimately develop a pandemic.
I would like to make the point that I said we shouldn't visit Raccoon City, and Scott was like, "No, it sounds like fun."
I know. And then he ran in there with glee and happiness. It was like watching, the Augustus run into the giant room in Willy Wonka towards the chocolate river. That was exactly what Scott looked like towards Raccoon City.
Oh, Scott, please forgive us. Please forgive us, Scott. We still love you.
So much.
That's one of the bad side effects of not being on one of the episodes is things just get pointed your direction.
Easy target and scapegoat.
Yes.
I'm going to change the term to Scott Goat from now on.
Scott Goat, not scapegoat.
Scott Goat.
Yeah, there has been many jokes. Anyway, so with that said, now that we're in a new alternate reality and universe, the DC universe. Well, no, we can't say DC universe. They'll sue us. The DCR universe. There we go.
There you go.
Yeah, it's not the Arrowverse. It's not the DC verse. It's the DCR universe.
This may be the darkest timeline. We're not sure.
Yeah, and we're really not. You never know. He might find another group of trash pandas and then try to recollapse the whole thing again and start over. Or maybe that's why the bees are disappearing. No, just kidding.
Oh my gosh, this episode keeps getting darker. I feel like I need to bring out a soundboard just to help the mood come back up.
This is what happens when more than half of us are tired. So we've come up with an idea. We've had a lot of great shows where we've talked about topics about gaming. We've talked about villains. We've talked about heroes. We've talked about monsters. And this pertains to more than just gaming, but also in story creation. We've talked a little bit about everything. And so we're going to take a slow ride. We're going to slow things down. We're going to jump on that lovely boat that goes down the chocolate river into the tunnel. And Alton is going to take over as Willy Wonka and tell us the story. And we will hopefully not see weird people eating cockroaches and all sorts of other stuff that you see in that tunnel in Willy Wonka.
Come with me and you'll be in a world of prestidigitation. That's right, friends. Tonight we are talking about our favorite RPG memories. And I'm super excited for it. And it's a good time to be able to just kind of reminisce on some of those things, because we talk a lot about the fundamentals of, like Dan was saying, story and gaming and how we got here. But oftentimes we allude to memories and stories and never really go into detail. So I'm really excited for this evening. And I wanted to start off, one of the stories that was or one of the sessions that was most impactful to me is I was testing a little game called Dimensions back in the day. It is currently on hiatus, still being worked on. But one of the goals with that was that we were trying to build a game that was good for new players and old players, right? People who have played RPGs over and over again and people who haven't. And if there's one thing that is on the forefront of every GM's mind when they're sitting down to run a campaign, what's the number one way to ruin a story? Add players.
Yeah.
And so
it's a guarantee. It happens every time.
Oh yeah, but the thing is that in order for it to really feel like an RPG, we wanted to make sure that there were lots of open options for people to be able to go off script and do things that weren't just choose A or choose B, right? And so in the very first episode that we put together, it was this haunted house that people were navigating through, and I wanted to make sure to add some really fun atmospheric stuff. And every time that people have played it, it's always turned out very, very differently. But one of the things that I wanted is as you enter the main house, you have this big grand stairway up to the second floor. It's this huge open atrium. And up at the top, you see, light streaming in from two glass doors. And so I had a group of players go up to that second level, open up the doors, and the way that I'd originally built it, it was just this nice stone balcony out overlooking, the rolling hills behind the estate. And off in the distance, you see a glittering silver lake. And it was just really pretty and atmospheric, right? And one of the players goes, well, do I have rope? Yeah, you've got rope. Oh, okay, well, I'm going to just, tie the rope and jump over the edge. Well, I don't have anything built for the outside of the house, but let's see what happens. So I try to scare them right back up the rope by, oh, hey, look, now like the ghost that started to chase you in at the beginning starts to come around the corner. It's a dragon, and everyone, of course, my thought is if I've got a dragon coming around the corner, people are probably going to climb back up the rope. But instead, everybody else decides to jump over, and they all get on the rope as the dragon is fire breathing. So naturally, they all fall to the ground and decide that they want to fight the dragon. And again, this is a group of people who have never played role-playing games before. So they don't have the concept of, I am a first level character. I don't have special abilities. I don't have things that are going to equip me for this fight. But they all decide to take it on. Well, one of the other players says, if there's a little bit of rope left, I'd like to try to jump up and grab it. Okay. And he somehow rolls perfectly, succeeds, grabs the jump, starts to climb back up as everybody else is literally running around the outside of the property being chased by this dragon. And we choose to side quest and follow his adventure for a minute. He goes in, finds a bedroom, grabs a whole bunch of pillows and sheets, and comes back out and throws them down at the bottom and just jumps over so he can land. Anyway, they take all of these pillows and sheets and all the 9 yards and decide that they're going to try to defeat this ghost dragon. And I just don't have the heart to tell them that anything is not possible because that's a fundamental breaking of good roleplay. So they go for it. 2 of them die, but somehow they get through. And I finally just hit a point where I'm like, they chase you back into the house. Okay, well, whatever. So we let the other 2 characters reappear back inside. And the guy goes, and I think that that's about the end of it, right? So they keep moving through the house. They get down and they're getting ready to fight the big baddie. And it plays out in a really interesting way that their weapons are all starting to break and whatnot. And the guy goes, I still have a towel, right? What are you talking about?
That's very Hitchhiker's Guide.
He's like, yeah, when I was up in the bedroom, you had said that there were like pillows and sheets and like an old towel and some clothes on the floor. And I told you I picked those up. Yeah. Yeah. So I want to use the towel and I want to hang this guy. And I'm like, what has happened? This whole thing just, first off, brand new players, right, decide they want to take on a ghost dragon that was never meant to be fought. So, okay, we got them out of that trouble. I let them respawn. Now they're going through the house. And now all of a sudden we're turning into the worst of all the murder hobos. Like, it was just the weirdest, craziest thing. And I have always tried to chase that feeling since. I redesigned the level a little bit to help dissuade players from trying to do such absurdity and did code in some options to make sure that if somebody did get too far off the beaten path, there would be consequences. But nevertheless, I will always remember the person who, after having established multiple times that they were working outside of the rules, still decided that they wanted to strangle the boss with a towel.
But see, this is the fantastic thing about the game. It gives you giant delusions of grandeur. I mean,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, when Han Solo says, "Well, now everyone has delusions of grandeur," he's really talking about people playing role playing or D&D or whatever RPG game they're playing, because that's really what it's like. It's like, I'm this hero now. I can do anything. Roll your dice. I got a 5. What does that give me? Oh, you're still level 1. That's a 6. I mean, they just think they can accomplish anything.
Or on
But
the opposite side, go ahead and roll your dice. Oh, you got a 20? Roll again. Oh, you got
yeah,
another 20. Well, I guess you can do anything.
yeah,
Congratulations.
you know. But at
I
the
was gonna,
same time, we get caught in that. You know, I remember playing Skyrim for the very first time. Not to move away, but I mean, it's an RPG.
Yeah,
But
you're good.
you know, playing Skyrim for the very first time, as you're starting out with your really low level character, you get to fight that very first dragon. It's not super tough. It's really easy. You kill the dragon. You're like feeling like $1,000,000. I killed this dragon. I'm wandering down, and there's a giant down there. I'm like, no problem. I just killed a dragon. I walk up. I swat, the giant with my sword twice. The giant gets annoyed, turns around, and hits me with its club. I go flying 60 feet through the air backwards and drop to the ground dead. I'm like, I'm humbled. I get it. And
so
sometimes your players need that. They need that humility because they
do.
feel immortal, and they need to get the crap beat out of them sometimes.
it's truth.
So that leads to a pretty natural segue, Krebs. What is your favorite crit success or crit failure from a campaign?
Oh gosh. There was one time I was running. I have several, and I'm sure you guys do too. But there was one time I was running a Dead Rain campaign, and there was a character who was incredibly agile. He actually was a circus performer, and so he was skilled with like gymnastics, acrobatics, and even sword dancing. So even though he was a performer, he was pretty proficient with the blade. But he was stuck in this. It was either like an RV or a trailer, and there was a Zed in there with him at close proximity, and he didn't have any of his weapons. I think it was an RV because he found a roadside emergency kit nearby, and very quickly he like grabbed it by the handle and just yoinked it open. And there was a road flare. He grabs the road flare, strikes it hot just as the zombie is coming for him. He's able to parry the zombie's attack, and then with a natural 20 runs the flare into the Zed's eye, into the skull, and just boils the brain, thus
Nice.
destroying the Zed. When I was running a Star Wars campaign, I had this group of Jedi that were I think I've mentioned this campaign before, but it is arguably the best campaign I've ever run in my life, where we had this ragtag group of Jedi brought in from all over the universe, and they're all Padawans, pre-knights, that sort of thing, and they're following visions that they're all having to take down a group of secret Sith, not just two, and they end up on a what's the word I'm looking for? They on a tribal sort of like I'm trying to find the right word, but they end up on a more pre-technology type planet. I cannot think of the word.
So something kind of like Dathomir or something like that?
Yeah. I'm trying to think if it actually was Dathomir. It's been so long I don't remember if I chose that planet, but it's something like that.
Okay.
And they end up on this planet. They encounter this terrible creature in this pyramid-like structure, but it ends up that it's a Sith Force illusion. And these acolytes, these tribal acolytes that are there, they're physically behind the illusion. One of my Jedi who always he Leroy's every single time, and so he runs in there all Leroy Jenkins style, and he goes to attack this giant creature, not realizing it's an illusion, slashes through it with his lightsaber, runs through it with his body, realizes that he's behind the illusion where there are 3 Sith warriors, each with non-lightsaber weapons, but made of a material that can deflect lightsaber blades. And one of them has a whip made of that material, where it's basically a series of links of this strange metal, all very thorned, all very sharp. And with a natural 20 on my side of the table, he ends up whipping this young Jedi's wrists together, lashing his hands together, and him dropping his saber. And then with a flick of the whip, causes it to unravel along his wrist like a chainsaw.
Ooh.
And both his hands pop off. And so he ends up with no hands for the next 3 months. Even though we got him some some genetically grown replacements, even though we got him to a place where he could still play his character and stuff, no matter what happened, at some point in the game, we would turn to someone and be like, could someone give Trevor a hand? Or we would say, because that was the player's name, not the character's name. And doesn't matter. Anytime he did anything cool, I'm like, oh, high five. Oh, I'm sorry. And we would just throw in all sorts of hand jokes the rest of the time, and it ended up being hilarious.
I love it. I mean, and that's the thing, right? Is you see stuff like this all the time. Improvisation is a team sport, right? Of like, things go right, things go wrong, things go funky, and then it turns into a beautiful joke down the road. And it's actually kind of funny. One of my all-time favorite magic items from Dungeons and Dragons is the immovable rod. And have I told you guys about the Dracolich?
Yes, but tell us again.
Okay, so there are many, many uses for an immovable rod, everyone. For those of you who have not used one before, they are a wondrous magic item. You are very lucky if the DM gives you one over the course of a game. If for any reason you are able to get 2 or more, absolutely do. All they are is a little, about a foot long rod, looks like it's made of iron, with a button in the middle of it. And whoever presses the button freezes that rod in time and space. It anchors it perfectly, such that it cannot be moved until the person who pressed the button unpresses it or they die. And even the or they die part is, technically speaking, more homebrew to help dungeon masters. But nevertheless, we're running through this dungeon. We're just right at the start of our campaign. And the whole point of it was for us to see the big bad evil guy get scared away, right? And we're trying to escape with this bit of treasure that we ought not have taken. And the Dracolich, his Dracolich comes through. Gigantic, draconic, skeletal, nasty thing, right? We're running across this bridge, and this gigantic Dracolich sticks its head through. Now, it is almost as big as any of us, its head is. But in a moment of quick thinking, I grab my immovable rod and I shove it up its nose, up into the cavity of the skull, and I click the button. And the DM goes, okay, well, I guess, roll a dexterity check, or I don't remember specifically what it was, an athletics check, I think. Okay, yeah, I got it. Perfect. Okay, well, yep, it's stuck there. And it's starting to thrash around, and so I grab my other one out, and I'm going to shove it up the other one. And so I do, and he makes me roll, and yep, I succeed again. Okay, well, that Dracolich is now very firmly pinned. My rogue jumps out over the side, goes down, gets to the Dracolich's phylactery, and we began our big, huge campaign that we were supposed to be starting at like level, I think it was level 5 or 6, and now we have control of a Dracolich. It was a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I just, I cannot speak highly enough about immovable rods, but I also love it when a plan comes together in the moment. What's another great example of an item or a weapon or something that you've seen that was used not in the way that it was intended, but to beautiful results?
So I played in a charity game. I played an old sea dog named Cod. I had a very, very long beard. I didn't believe in cutting my hair. My guy, he'd been out at sea quite often, and he was going a little bald on top, and he'd wrap his beard up around his head, sometimes shove it in his ears so he didn't have to hear sirens, stuff like that. Well, during this campaign, I loved this beard so much. We got to this part where we could ask for any magical enchantment, and it would be granted to us. So my character asked that his beard be enchanted so that it could never break. It would become indestructible, which I thought was awesome. Everyone else is like, why the crap did you just waste this? You could have wished for anything, and you indestructible beard? What?
Excuse me, everybody?
It was long. I mean, my beard went, my guy was, I think he was like 5'6", 5'7", but my beard went all the way to the ground and a little bit beyond that. So, so we get to this point. We have this magic ship that is flying through the air. It's this cold region, and we have this massive horde of harpies that are flying at us. Now, I fight with a giant battle axe. And my buddy, I'm old. I have this other guy. I think his name was Elm. I can't remember his name exactly. But all I remember is I fling my beard back and I launch myself over the side of the boat and yell, "Grab me beard!" And so he grabs a hold of my beard, and I'm just spinning like this, and my axe is out, and I'm just hacking through these harpies. Because my beard is indestructible. My chin's up, and I'm just spinning around at the bottom of the boat, just mowing through these harpies. And then, he pulls me up, and the DM just looks at me and goes, "That really happened?" I'm like, "Yep." And he's like, "Wow." He's like, 1,200 experience points right there. And I'm just like, "Yep." Because that was, it was nothing. It was just an enchanted beard, but it was indestructible. So I had no cares or worries in the world that would break. As long as he held tight, I was safe. It's something unusual that no one would think of, but I turned it into something extremely useful in that moment.
And nobody made fun of your indestructible beard ever again.
Yeah, the only problem is by the end of that campaign, we all got these really nasty pixie elves things turned us into infants. So I'm like 4 now with this massive beard that's indestructible.
Massive indestructible beard.
But I'm 4.
Oh, man. Speaking of enchantments and items that are impervious to the game, recently we've started hosting Adventurers League over at Mythos, and we're having just lots of little intro games and things like that. And so I pulled up to the table with a randomly generated character, and we start to make our way through this dungeon, and the rogue that had been playing with us needed to leave. And so I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll just start checking for traps then. And the DM's like, what do you mean? You're an artificer. I'm like, I know, don't worry about it. I'll get this taken care of. And so I'm playing this Stormforged Artificer, big automata guy, right? And so I turn over to the gnome bard and I say something to the effect of, Bard, come here, show me what you've got. And I pick him up and I throw him down the hall, tripping all of the traps. And and he wasn't particularly happy about it. But I, because of the way that my character was built, I had Cure Light Wounds. And so as soon as he made his way back up the stairs, I offered my hand to him and I said, we must be friends, right? Something to the effect. I don't particularly recall. And so he shakes my hand and regains a whole bunch of hit points. And he goes, "Huh, okay, that was nice." And I said, "Sweet, what's over there?" Boom. And the DM's like, "Okay, you got to make an opposed strength check." I'm like, "Deal, let's do it." Little teeny tiny gnome. He happened to be min-maxed so that he had no strength. And I happened to have strength as my highest. And I chucked him down the second hallway. It became a recurring gag for the rest of the night. And when the player didn't come back the next week, it's okay. He's a friend of mine. He wasn't offended. He got the joke. But when he didn't come back next week, the DM decided to award me a special magical item that was a gnome dart.
A gnome dart.
It was beautiful. So then I got to actively use it. However, at leveling up as an artificer, I got to have a limited number of enchantments on items that I controlled, one of which could be returning, which means that if you have a ranged weapon, you can throw it and it will return to you at your command instead of needing to go and pick it up or anything like that. And so after the DM has said that I have this known dart, I'm like, okay, well, what are the stats? How do you want me to set it up? And he says, well, basically just treat it like a dagger. I'm like, okay, so would you consider this a martial weapon, like a thrown weapon that I can use? And he says, yeah, that's exactly what I had in mind. I'm like, awesome. And I just sit back and go real quiet to the end of the night. And then sure enough, there comes a point where it is time. And I take my gnome dart and I just start throwing him and calling him back and throwing him and calling him back, tripping all the things, getting the bad guys pissed off. They've got this uncrossable chasm, and the people who are also in the party with me are going way too slow. And so I'm like, I'll just check this out. Phew. And so now I have a gnome dart. It is one of my favorite companions.
Very nice.
Yeah.
It's interesting how people can use magic items in different ways. It's even more amazing when magic items just things that the roll of a dice just happens to coincide. If you've never heard the Wubba Wubba story from R.A. Salvatore, look it up on YouTube. I'll recap it a little bit, but it's something that he talked about on the show a long time ago, and he's talked about it at several conventions. But he's gamed. I mean, R.A. Salvatore's gamed for years. A lot of these writers have. But he played this gnome character that had this magic wand that the activation phrase for it was Wubba Wubba. And whenever he did that, there was a table that was rolled. It was kind of a wild magic type wand that random things would happen. However, throughout this entire campaign, for some reason, every time he would yell Wubba Wubba, this one player's character always was the result, always got the end result of whatever happened. Time and time again. So there's this one point in the adventure where he's got to float up to do whatever he needs to, and someone's like, oh, well, just in case you fall to your death, maybe you should leave all your items behind, just so we can, we don't lose those. He's like, okay, so he kind of strips down to his bare clothes, attaches, starts floating up. Well, something happens and he falls. He starts falling. He's plummeting to his death. And so this player's like, now's my chance. He picks up the wand, yells Wubba Wubba, and points it at him. Rolls the dice. And then he calls out the number, and the DM starts laughing. And he's like, what? And it's like, you just rolled. Caster replaces with target. And so his character zaps up and plummets to his death. It's things like that make the game amazing. And that's totally random. But for some reason, this character was always picked on by this item. And yes, it's not a real item. It's something fictitious. It's imaginary, and it's in a game. But for some reason, in these games and campaigns and adventures, they take on a life of their own within everyone's imagination collectively. And it's like for a moment, and only when you're sitting at that table, some of those items really have a life. And they do things weird and in unexpected ways.
The idea that something mundane instead becomes something very important to the campaign.
Yeah.
Yeah. Krebs, do you have anything like that? Any mundane item or person or passing notion from a GM that turned into something too important to pass up again?
Yeah. I have two stories, and I'll be as brief as I can. In terms of like taking the mundane and using it in ways other than my older brother is he loves the Wheel of Time series, and he got me to be a fan of it as well. And he had the Wheel of Time D20 RPG, and I did what I normally do, and I played a strong, somewhat charismatic, maybe not the most intelligent type fighter. For those of you familiar with Wheel of Time, I was a Shinaran, and of course, I love me some swordplay. So I have this really nice Shinaran sword. It's actually like a warder's weapon. Again, for the fans who know the story, you know what that means. But basically, think like a katana with an English style hilt, basically. Um, and we were in this fight. Of all the characters in the group, I am the most capable when fighting sort of like these dark demonic creatures called Trollocs. And we were in this fight. It got really bad, and we were at the raggedy edge. Some of us were very close to death, including myself. I was getting real weak, and we were getting dangerously close to a total party kill, a TPK. And it's my turn, and I'm if I don't do something meaningful, then the tide will not turn, and one or more of us are going to die. And so it comes to me. I'm in a terrible situation, and I just kind of sit there and think for a second. I go, I throw my sword. Now, this is a large sword. It is not a throwing weapon. I am a strong guy in the game, but this is not meant to be thrown. There are penalties that are applied. And so my brother goes, are you sure this is what you want to do? It's like your only weapon. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to throw my sword. And so he goes, okay, here are the penalties, here are the factors, and roll the die. And so I describe how I reach up both hands in a two-handed grip, my large strength stat flexing in my arms to the best of my ability, blood running out, and I hurl it over my head like an axe. And I roll the die, and I hit a 20. And this game allows for exploding 20s. So I grab the die, and I roll again. And sure enough, I hit a second critical. So this giant sword, this large sword, not giant, but large sword, goes hurling through the air like a giant deadly boomerang, and it strikes the Trolloc directly in a vital spot, killing it on the spot. And thus, having seen this, my party is encouraged, and they're given hope, and everybody gets like a temporary attack buff, and then we all rally and we take out the rest of the bad guys, even though some of us are near death. This buys us time to get healed, to run away, and the party lives to fight another day. The best part about this, though, was that it became my signature move, and in four other situations where things started looking terrible, I turned to my brother and I go, I throw my sword. And he goes, oh, here we go. And I eventually took feats that made it so that throwing my sword was more tenable. It was actually an ability I was developing. And so I actually saved myself or the party on 4 other occasions by doing something I shouldn't have done. And then, of course, the real punchline drops when on the 6th time I tried this, I hit an invisible shield that I could not see because I do not wield the 1 power, and I now lost my sword, and now I was hosed. But he let me do it successfully 5 times, and it became, in fact, it got to the point where like the party, we would be in a situation, and it wouldn't even be that bad a situation. It would just be an enemy at a distance, and then the party would like look at me and be like, Josh, what do you think? And I was like, yeah, I'll throw my sword. And so just like it became this thing. So that was, I mean, that's a small thing to do with a rather ordinary item, but it ended up becoming a signature move, and it became hilarious. The other story is when I was GMing that same Star Wars game I told you about. The character who lost his hands, before that happened, he had encountered an NPC that had these force-imbued items that had special qualities. Of course, everything was very mysterious and covert in its presentation. He had to kind of discover the nature of these things. But when he did, the old crone told him, "You may only here are my wares," and there weren't that many, but you may only. The rule is you can have but one. And it was at this bazaar, at like this flea market, and he followed the rules, but then he tried to circumvent them. He tried to buy another one, and she absolutely refused, and he couldn't get past her. She was surprisingly and curiously quick and things like that. So he walked away, and inappropriately using his force powers, he used Jedi mind trick on a passerby, gave them instructions to go and purchase an item from this woman. He just said, he gave this person, this other NPC, credits and said, go buy something from that woman over there. And this is one of those moments we have talked about the rules of gameplay, and this is one of those moments where the player is trying to outwit the GM or the player is trying to beat the GM. And of course, I wasn't going to have it. So I looked at him and I go, okay. And then I let him roll dice and let him think that he has choice in the matter. And he sends the NPC. NPC comes back carrying some large object, some large bell-shaped object that's under a tarp and a couple of books. And some other items in a bag. And he hands the large object under a covering and the bag to the player. The player opens up the covering, and it's this cage with a small furry animal inside. And then in the bag, there are certain items, which he immediately dismisses. What he doesn't know is that I have just sold him a creature of my own creation completely on the fly, and I called it a Malkavian hamster. Malkavian hamsters can eat virtually anything, but they have almost instantaneous bioorganic reactions to whatever they eat. You can weaponize a Malkavian hamster. Swarms of Malkavian hamsters have destroyed planets. This is the kind of thing that, like, he has no idea. He doesn't know, but there are 2 books inside that bag. One of them is The Apocalypse, The End of the World. Oh, no, it was The Apocalypse, Malkavian Hamsters, and You. And then the other one was Malkavian Hamsters as a Pet, a survival guide. And so, like, it was all this, like, very funny stuff. He didn't know what this thing would do. And to be honest with you, neither did I. But as time went on, he discovered that if he fed it certain foods, it would turn into a reusable flash grenade, essentially, blowing all of its hair off in a giant flash. And then it would grow back in the next hour or so. Or if you fed it the wrong stuff, it would get literally explosive diarrhea. And so he found ways to weaponize the hamster. When he lost his hands, the hamster burrowed out of its cage because it wasn't in the right kind of material and it ate its way out, found his hands in the freezer and ate one, which allowed it to turn into a temporary prosthetic appendage, still very much a hamster, but it became more mitten-shaped, and it, like, grabbed onto the stump of his wrist, forming a physical and a psychic bond that allowed him to have a temporary hand until we could get him a real one. So it ended up being very Deus Ex Machina, and I get that, but the Malkavian hamster became like this hilarious gag on the side, and it also taught him never to try to outwit me again.
Okay, so that's one that I'm going to have to remember and use. I like that a lot. One of my fun things that I do with players once they start to get into dungeons is give them mimics of many uses, right? Mm-hmm. Exactly that same idea, but I like a lot of that a lot. I haven't thought about taking it down the what do I feed them route. Okay. I can dig it.
We ended up doing some pretty crazy random stuff, but I also had to come up with, like, certain physical gestures that mimicked the hamster, and also the sound whenever he didn't feel well. It was like, and just like we had like all these little things that we would do. Some of the other people would then start making sounds for the hamster on my behalf. Mm-hmm. It became this whole gag.
I love it. Yeah, one of the things that's been a lot of fun for me with players who do try to circumvent rules like that. I try very hard to always allow there to be a way to allow people to do the things that they want to do. But just like any good genie's wish, oftentimes there may be unexpected ramifications. And it's a good time, you know. One of the fun things that I like to do in Strahd is I like to show players how they're going to die. And the way that I'll do that is by giving them a doll of themselves, you know, grasping at their heart or their hand on the side of the head or things like that. And then the longer that they survive, the more animated the doll becomes. But only they see it, right? Only they are the ones that get to interact with it. And it just ends up being a really, really fun thing. What are some of the other stories that you guys have from situations where events were foreshadowed in a neat way?
I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think of some right at the moment. when I've played as a player, I haven't had a lot of DMs that have done foreshadowing. It's been a pretty straight, hey, this is what's going on. This is here and there. And when I've ran one-offs, I don't really do that. I'm just trying to think, when did I do some foreshadowing? I know I have. I just can't think of a moment at the moment.
Do you mind if I throw one in there? Oh, no,
yeah,
no.
You go. You go. I still don't have one yet. So you go, and then I'm sure one will come to mind as you're talking.
That same older brother that played Wheel of Time, there was a point where he wanted to play Rifts, my arena there, and he had never really played it before. And so I was like, okay. And this was before the Bourne Identity came out in movie theaters. In fact, it was just before, and I hadn't seen a trailer or anything. So just keep that in mind. I came up with this idea, and I built his character sheet, and I gave it to him, and it had just like the essential vitals, but most of the sheet was blank. And when we start the story, I say, you wake up in a dirt-bottomed basement. You are wearing traveling clothes, mostly made of denim or leather. They feel comfortable enough, but unfamiliar. As you go to sit up, you feel that there are obviously wounded parts of your body, bruised and battered. And then as he inspects his body, I describe every wound, every bruise, every tender place. He finds that there are like these strange circles at the crooks of his elbows on both arms. There's one circle on each arm. He finds that his head has a certain bruising pattern across his temples and right down the center of his forehead, and things of this nature, not just bruises and injuries, but patterns and specifics. I show him a diagram after we describe all the wounds. I show him a diagram of his body and where all the injuries are and what shapes they take. As the story progresses, he realizes he has amnesia. And I did this because he'd never played the game. And I figured the best way for him to discover the world was to play a character who was discovering the world. And so I gave him amnesia. But unbeknownst to him, he is a highly trained assassin, again, pre-Bourne Identity, just saying, highly trained assassin who is reflexively responding to the stimuli in the world. He knows how to handle a weapon. He knows how to do specific kinds of hand-to-hand combat. He doesn't realize how destructive he is. He doesn't realize how trained to kill he is. As time goes on, what he discovers as the story unfolds is that he was sort of mutinied against by his number one in his platoon. He is part of a military unit of assassins. He was mutinied by his team, kidnapped, rendered helpless, strapped to a chair, and his body injected with a prototype liquid armor. Think Venom style in a way, but it's armor when it comes out to the skin, which he discovers over time. He also discovers its shortcomings and its strengths. And in that process, they wiped his mind using technology. They actually gave him intentionally amnesia, and they used him as a vessel for this contraband that they were going to sell to an alien faction. He was a container. And but in discovering this, he found out how to use the armor. And the foreshadowing part is every wound on his body told the story of how this got into his body and why he can't remember anything. It also gives him the recipe for how to get all of his memories back.
I can dig it. Yeah.
Dan? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I did remember one while you're talking, so.
Go for it.
Please.
Go
for it.
So, it was a one-off adventure that I did, which ended up being not a one-off. It actually ended up being more because people liked it. So basically, when we put it together, I had them drop a level 10 character, and I said, you can have anything you want. You can have whatever equipment you want. Whatever magic stuff, you name it, you put it on there, it's yours. So they did that. And so I started the adventure off. We're in this massive cave. They were just slogging through hordes of demons and everything imaginable that was horrible. And then they get to the very end, and there's this massive, massive dragon that is super powerful. They're trying to fight it for their lives. They can't get out. The way they came in, there's demons sitting there just waiting for them. We're talking like, pit fiends and balors and stuff like that. They die. They literally die. Yeah, and they're like, man, that really sucked. I'm like, your characters wake up. You find yourself in an inn, and there's someone pounding at the door. And then they open the door, and there's this old man. And he's like, and he pretty much says, the world is going to end. I have been told by the gods that you are the ones that will stop this. And he starts describing this dragon and these demons that have been sent by this dark god, and they have to go slay it. And everyone just stops and realizes, holy crap, that's the end of this adventure. And we have to somehow build our characters up to what they were, but do it better to circumvent our own doom.
Nice.
It was a really cool series of adventures, but man, it was difficult for the players because they were having fun, but at the same time there's this overwhelming impending doom that's still lingering there after every adventure. Like, are we closer? Are we almost dead? I mean, because they didn't know what pieces they were doing that was changing it or making it real. So it made it really a very interesting game because every time they had to make a really critical choice, they really stopped and debated about it. There was no like, oh yeah, we're just going to go this way, because they were really wanting to avoid the doom, the death.
Yeah.
So I've never ran a game quite like that, with players so like, oh crap, and just like, unfortunately, it would kind of stall the game a little bit because they would really evaluate that out.
Yeah, but it also gives the players, for the first time that I've ever heard of, permission to metagame, right?
Yeah.
Like, you gave them meta in the game.
Yeah.
And so that's brilliant. I've never even thought of that. That is genius.
Yeah, I really, really like that device. I will probably end up stealing it and implementing it at some point.
That's okay.
I am a collector of information and torture techniques.
No, it's okay, because you do have a lot of metagamers. You have people that try to metagame, and when you kind of like pull that wall out, and it's like, and say, okay, here it is, you have it now, it kind of takes that away in a way. And now, your players, instead of like, oh, I want to be this big, massive guy, I don't care, the Death Knight strolling down, who cares? I'm gonna go after him and kill anyone in my way. Instead, they're like, if I kill him, which path am I going down? If I run away and take the villagers with me, is that changing history? Because they don't know the history that led them to that point. They just know the end point. So it was lots of fun.
I love it. One of the things, I'm running Curse of Strahd for a group of 9 players right now, and 7 of them have either played or DM'd it before. So I've given them what I call prescience, where I tell them outright, if you see something that you have seen before, as long as you can work it out in a way that makes sense in character of, I have a feeling, or I have had this dream, or I was, once encountered an old woman on the side of the road who told me to watch out for, right? Like, if ever you want to work it in, you are more than welcome to work it in. But I also warn them that the mists of Barovia are constantly shifting, and oftentimes it's difficult to scry into the future when it's moving like that.
Yes.
And it makes for a lot of fun. But similarly to one of the things that you did there, one of the other things that I love to bring into campaigns is the idea of everybody gets one. Meaning, when you're creating your character, I want you to choose one thing that you just think is really cool, that steps outside of the rules. And it needs to serve a purpose for your character, but whatever makes sense, everybody gets one thing. And for some players, they just choose to like bump a stat a little bit more, drop another one, whatever, things like that. Other times they get really into it and use it as a huge character building moment, and I love that too. But one of the favorite things that I've chosen for a character that I played a paladin who who grew up in a very wealthy, well-known, well-respected family, went out into the world to study, to become a paladin, to grow his magics and his powers. And as he was on his way home, the Nameless One just kind of showed up, said, "Hey, how's it going?" Right? And at first, of course, he was very shocked or whatever. But no,
Please
no,
tell me
no.
they battle for a golden violin.
No, not quite. It's even better than that. And he says, "No, no, no, don't worry. I'm not here for you. In fact, I'm here to help you." And he says, "Now, the thing is, you're becoming more powerful all the time. I could see you being a powerful enemy, but sometimes it's more helpful to have allies than enemies." And he says, "So, if you ever need any help, here's all you need to do." And he gives him a quick little set of words to call out if he ever
Wubba
needs
wubba.
help. Yeah.
Shazam!
But at any rate, so the paladin finishes making his journey home, and as he crests the hill, he sees that the mansion that he grew up in is on fire, that the door has been busted down, and that there's signs of struggle and all kinds of things. And he, of course, gets very panicked, begins to fight his way in, starts to get really beaten down. And as he turns the corner into the great room, he sees his whole family cowering there under the hand of some people who are about to kill them. Snaps, and the first thing that comes to mind, and the Nameless One appears and saps the life out of all of the people who are attacking the family in the room and heals his family. And he, of course, drops down, starts to talk to his parents. "What's going on? Like, what's happening?" And the father says, "Son, like, there's something you need to know. Our wealth and our fortunes and our good repute, it's come somewhat dishonestly, and now it's starting to catch up to us." And it turns out that his father and mother have knowingly been part of this syndicate for generations, that they were hoping to get their son out from it, but it turns into this very negative thing. And in his anguish, he starts to kind of lose it, and he saps the life out of his entire family. Of course, the Nameless One shows up and says, "Now, you don't think that magic is just somewhat infinite, right?" He says, "There are many planes, many corners of the universe, and whenever you take something, whenever you do something, you're taking that from somewhere else. And so I've granted you the gift of healing." And so now we have a paladin who is geared as a healer, and my one thing was that as a bonus action, I could heal anybody for as many hit points as I wanted to, but it had to come out of my personal hit points permanently. And the
Wow.
only way that I could recharge those hit points was to have a willing creature give them up. I could not trick them. I could not coerce them in any way. They had to know what they were doing, and they had to know that they were giving up their life to do so. And it made for a really fun character, but it also created some really cool mechanical bits inside the game. Conflict about every time that I'm casting a spell, every time that I'm healing somebody, I know that I'm taking that from somewhere else. Created a really cool character arc to learn that the same was also true every time we do good acts. We're taking power away from the Nameless One and from those who would destroy the planes upon themselves, right? It was a really, really fun thing. But I always love those types of situations where you create things that exist outside of the regular rules of play in such a way that it inspires the story to continue.
Well, and I mean that's kind of the amazing thing about this. Looking at say D&D, Forgotten Realms, stuff like that, Dragonlance even. Magic is like this infinite source. You can cast spells over and over and over. There's no real balance, but you just created some balance. If you want to do this good deed, there's this negative side on it. It's like physics. Brandon Sanderson does a fantastic job with that. A lot of his magic systems are based around physics. If you're, an 85-pound girl trying to push a 160-pound guy, you're the one that's going to go flying back until you anchor yourself to something that's heavier than him. So I like that. That's something that's always I love magic. Don't get me wrong, but that's something that's always I've always wanted to kind of counterbalance. Like even in my writing, Yes, magic. There's the power. There's the power of creation, but it's limited based on yourself. You know, as you cast it, it drains your will, so to say. And that's you're reserved to be able to cast these spells through your power. There's also the power of the void. It's darkness. It comes from death and decay and stuff like that. But not only that, creation is elemental based. So if you're really good at fire, you're not. It takes more energy to do something with water. If you're really good at air, it takes more energy for earth, and vice versa. So, because I like that balance. There's got to be that balance. So it's not like, man, I can control earth, fire, water, air. No, something's got to be hard for you to do. And you can still do it, but it's just a little bit stronger, or it takes more effort to do that. So I like that. If you want to heal, it takes from you, and then you have to have someone willingly give you that. That's even harder to do.
It's a good time. So I know we don't have too much time left. So the last thing that I think I want to end on is with that kind of foundational premise of having something cool that you could balance or that you could change or that you could add to a character. What is a mechanic that either of you would love to have in a future character, either that is fixing an existing one or something that exists outside of the rules?
Oh gosh, dang, that is hard. The funny thing is, I think I've done that several times in various incarnations. We were discussing this before the show, and I am the kind of GM that almost never runs a module. I've run a few modules in my day, but not many, because I prefer to tell, as Alton instructs us at the end of every episode, I like to tell my story, whatever it may be. And so I have often gone back and addressed mechanics that weren't fun at the time. Sometimes we go back to those mechanics. But I often break the rules because it makes the game fun if we do it a certain way. But there is in Rifts. Oh, surprise! In Rifts, there is. Let me back up a step. The Avengers films. I love them in general. Love them all. Enjoy them all. Some more than others, but I love them. Captain Marvel is a super cool character to me, except I think she breaks everything. I think she breaks absolutely everything because she's too much. And it has nothing to do with her gender. It has to do with her power set. And the fact that, we discussed this previously, but like her weakness is immature emotions, right?
Yeah.
Like not just I don't think I phrased it this way last time, but it's not just emotions. I mean, emotions are real and useful. Even Tony Stark uses emotions to his advantage or his weakness, whatever. But like her immaturity is her weakness.
Yeah.
But then that's it. And then what does she, spoilers, guys, spoilers. What does she do? When something gets tough, she flies like a bullet through other spaceships, bringing them down single-handedly. Thanos, who defeated the Hulk in hand-to-hand combat, headbutts her with great force, and she doesn't even flinch. In my opinion, she's too OP. Now, the reason I bring up that example, in Rifts, there is a dimension book. I think technically, I think it's a source book, but there is a book called Phase World, which has some of the best toys in the game. But there's a companion to it, and in that companion, there is a type of character called a Cosmonite, and the Cosmonite is Captain Marvel. They fly through space. They have sort of like psionically summoned armor that comes onto their body. Some of them are drawn with mohawks in space. I mean, it's that on the nose, right? And they are, for all intents and purposes, virtually indestructible, virtually limitless in power. I mean, there might be some things at the end there, some things at the fringe, but they are meant for cosmic space battles against spaceships. This is before the movie. This was like a decade and a half before the movie ever came out. So keep that in mind. But like they were designed to be able to take on starship armadas single-handedly. So they have insane amounts of hit points and armor. They have insane capabilities, and it's just too broken. So one time, as an experiment, I introduced a godlike character into the game that after a scrimmage of combat with this godlike character. It was the only thing I could come up with that could make a cosmonite actually feel less than indestructible. And this godlike creature was able to kick off an incantation and then hit the cosmonite that made them mortal for a short period of time, made them mortal for like 24 hours or something. And then the godlike creature stepped away, but much like the Nameless One, started pulling strings, and every bad thing that could show up started showing up around this cosmonite and threatening their life, because now they were completely destructible. So in answer to your question, is there a mechanic that we wish we could change or whatever? I love the concept of the cosmonite, but I hate how indestructible and how invulnerable they are. I would like to fix that so that regular player character type models are never undefeatable.
Nice. No, I mean, for the character I've wanted to play for quite a while, and it's tweaking and changing the standard of the character. Basically, I want to play a vampire assassin. Now, however, this vampire has sworn that it would never take a life by drinking their blood. So he's more of a psychic vampire. So he feeds off of their fear and stuff like that psychically. But he won't take the life of innocents. He hunts down those evildoers, feeding off their fear as he's hunting them down, and does it like indiscriminately. So, I mean, a little kind of Vampire Hunter D-ish a bit, but minus the blood drinking part. Because I want something challenging. I want something a little bit different, because he's not always going to be able to feed. He can't feed the entire time until he gets reaches the person he's contracted to take out. And even then, he doesn't drink their blood. He kills them with swords, stuff like that. But it's the fear that he basks in. And so this whole time he's struggling with this hunger. It would be really easy to go scare someone and feed off of them, but he refuses. The only person he will feed off of is his victim that he is contractually bound to kill. And if he doesn't get a contract, he starves until he gets it one. And so, I mean, in a way, it's kind of like, any other job, you can't buy food until you get paid type thing. So I think it would be fun. It'd be really challenging and unique in a way. But I've just never found the right game setting to play it in.
I can dig it. Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun. So before I wrap up my piece here, Krebs, right? You say you want to fix the Cosmonite. If you had some assistance in doing that so that you could test it in a play setting, is that something in which you'd be interested?
Absolutely, of course. I love play testing.
Well, then I have excellent news for both of you, and this is something that was not planned or scripted beforehand, but I would very much like to DM a game with both of you. And if those are the one things that you would like to bring to the table, I would very much like to help you work them in a way that will be meaningful to the story. Do you find these terms amenable?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. No, we could do it. I think we could do it. It'd be really interesting. A psychic vampire assassin with a cosmonite.
Then I will allow that to trail out into the universe and let all of the dungeon crawlers who are listening right now get excited about what could come very soon.
I totally can see myself jumping on your back and riding you through space.
Well, what's funny is in Rifts, and of course, no shocker, right? But psi vampires, a very real thing.
Yeah, I know. That's partially where the idea came from. But that would be a really cool, if the characters teamed up. Like, he just jumps on the back, holds onto the scruff of your neck or the armor, and you zip in, and he just jumps off and sword in hand. Yeah, I think that could be a really cool maneuver.
We could improve the gnome dart.
Yes. Yes.
It is a perfect weapon. It cannot be.
Yes. Well, we're out of time. As always, we've been able to pull a rabbit out of our hat, unlike Bullwinkle. And Rocky, for those of you that didn't even know that reference, yeah, kudos to you. Most people don't. But yeah, no, this has been a great show. If you have any ideas, any thoughts about what we've talked about, we definitely want to hear from you. We put it out there to the internet, to the universe. to hear back from you. Not a lot of people have taken that opportunity. I know in the past we used to get people take that opportunity. We would love to hear from you, and there might be an opportunity in the future that that might give you something other than just hearing your name on the show. You might be getting something in return randomly if you are chosen. But definitely let us know your stories. Let us know things you want to hear about, what you'd like us to talk about, because we can definitely talk about games, writing, geek stuff till the sun comes up and the moon goes down, or whatever you want to call it. I am now officially tired and can't think straight. So with that said, I'm going to say we're out of here. We'll catch you next time.
And friends, tell your story, whatever may come.
And always remember to be epic and don't suck.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.